In what really epitomizes traveling for both of us, this section of the campervan trip around South Africa culminated in a quite unexpected and surprising activity, which was at a campsite near Underberg in the Southern Drakensberg. We ended up doing a 3-day horse riding expedition into the high mountains of Lesotho, across the border out of South Africa. Georgia and I had never ridden horses before, but we had this opportunity because of the campsite we were staying at in Underberg. What a spectacular opportunity to be on horseback for 6 hours a day, not for the faint of heart. So this is episode 3 of In Search of Trails, our campervan trip around South Africa. Up to this point, we'd left Cape Town about 3 weeks prior, and we'd been to such places as Bontebok National Park in Swellendam, De Rust in the Karoo, Storms River back on the coast, Hogsback up in the mountains in the Eastern Cape for some beautiful trail running, Addo in the Eastern Cape, and Cintsa on the coast near East London. We left Cintsa having done a ride at Emerald Vale Brewery to a place that I'd been to before with my family many years before, which is a hotel or resort also on the Transkei called Trennery's. And there's this old barge that takes you across the Kai. A couple of vehicles I think can fit on it at a time. While just after we'd set off from the southern side of the river, that I'd get the drone up and try and get a shot of us with Pete the campervan on this barge. And the barge was entirely made of steel, and when you fire up the drone and arm the propellers, it will often give you a warning saying compass error, which I'm pretty sure it did. I can't actually remember now. And as soon as I tried to take off, it didn't actually take off. It just veered sideways across the deck of this thing. And by some miracle, it hit this box of the barge and stopped. I reached down, the propellers are still going, and I had to grab it, like propellers cutting my hands. And anyway, managed to keep the drone. And when we got off the barge on the other side, I quickly put the drone up and got a picture of Georgia driving off the barge, and then us driving into the Transkei. And I mean, those roads are just pothole ridden. And anyway, and Trennery's is it's nothing special, but iOverlander did report to us that it had an incredibly good campsite, which it really did. Beautiful green grass, nice ablutions, access to the beach. But the beautiful thing about June on the Transkei is that it's fantastic weather there. And I mean, we were in shorts and t-shirts and on the beach during the day, walking in the waves and so on. It was a bit of a lay low period. We'd come from Hogsback and Cintsa, where we did quite a lot of activity. Quite beautiful. We met a strange dog at Trennery's while we were braaiing there one night. A lovely campsite in the shade of some massive trees. I think we played some tennis equipment from the hotel, and some push-ups on the tennis court. 20. We didn't have a timeline per se or a schedule, but we did know that we wanted to go and stay with our friends in Hoedspruit. So we were trying to make relative haste as we sort of headed north, and we were only in the Eastern Cape. I mean, we still had KwaZulu-Natal north of us. And we opted to head to Port St. John's for a night. If you know Port St. John's, you'll probably be asking why on earth we wanted to go there, and we did indeed find out that it's a bit of a dump. It's got some incredible natural beauty though. The two gates, I think they're called. We stayed in an actually quite nice campsite there. It was a little bit removed from the town, nice and quiet and quite beautiful. And we got on the blower that night the general managers of a place nearby called Umngazi Hotel and Spa, a really quite luxury and beautiful place, again, that I'd been to with my family many years before. And I mean, I was only 14 or so I couldn't really, I had a feeling I had a little bit of a special relationship with the GMs, because I emceed their daughter's wedding. And so I got them on the phone and said, look, we're passing by, could we pull it? And they epitomize hospitality, and therefore their role as the GMs of a fantastic hotel and spa, it couldn't be better suited to them. So they invited us in. It's a 15k drive down a very bad road off near Port St. John's. By the way, if you're enjoying this content, please consider subscribing. It would make a world of difference for me. And remember to hit that bell icon so you get notified of new videos. So Umngazi for 3 nights was a real treat. We stayed in the GM's house, which is this 5-bedroom house. I mean, they're the general managers of the place, and it's renowned for its buffet style food, and they were able to get the chefs on the blower at any point and just say, you know, bring up a couple of fillet steaks to the house for me, please, and just it was a real treat. Umngazi is just this wonderful place. There's a ferry that can take you across the river to the beach. They had a bonfire on the first night where all the guests from the hotel are invited, and they and they give the kids marshmallows, and everyone's sitting around and everyone brings drinks in cooler boxes. Just wonderfully organized. Beautiful long beach that you can go for walks on. And then they've also recently undertaken the laying out of some trail running and mountain biking routes around the hotel. And I think there were 4 or 5 mountain biking routes, and we opted for a 20k ride or so. And typically the pattern of me taking Georgia on a ride is me saying that it's going to be so and so meters of elevation gain, when in fact it's going to be 3 or 4 times that. I've learned now not to lie and to really just lay it on thick at the beginning. But this one was one of those instances where Georgia was just moaning at me the whole time. It was extremely hard. There were some very big sharp climbs, but it was wonderful. It was like a sort of back along the road towards where we come from, Port St. John's, and then we nipped into the sort of local communities around there where the majority of the staff at Umngazi all live. And then it was just undulating hills, some nice long downhills, all jeep track. And then eventually we got onto the dunes across the river from the hotel.
Oh, this is sick.
And it was almost dark, so we were getting a little bit nervous. But and then there's a gong on the other side of the river, so that when guests want to come back from their beach walk, or in this case their cycle that took far too long, they bash the gong, and the boat comes and fetches them. So man, I mean, I would strongly recommend Umngazi. I would strongly recommend the general managers, Keith and Nicole, and we're eternally grateful to them for putting up with us there. From Umngazi we headed essentially due north on the R61, essentially north from Port St. John's via Flagstaff and Lusikisiki all the way to Kokstad, and then it goes on to Underberg. So that was quite a long drive, 4 or 5 hours as I recall. We were heading to a place that we found on iOverlander called Khotso Horse Trails and Campsite, or Campsite and Horse Trails or something. And it had good reports, and there was power and beautiful campsites and so on. We expected it would be a little bit cold. It's in the foothills of the Southern Drakensberg. And so about 2 k's before Underberg, you turn left onto Drakensberg Garden Road, and it's about 5 k's along that road. We were trying to do remote work. We are freelancers, Georgia and I, and internet connectivity problems were really the biggest problem that we had on the trip. But certainly to have something like Starlink, for example, or just a consistent internet connection, but probably Starlink, would have made a world of difference for us. So Khotso is this place run by a guy called Steve Black, who we met shortly after we arrived. And Steve's this wonderful guy, late 60s, I think he was in when we met him, and it turns out that he's an ultra endurance runner. He once raced a guy from Cape Town to Durban, and he ran, and the other guy kayaked.
I heard you want to run this thing. I'll paddle. Let's race. So on the 17th of May this year, the race began.
The race was, I think he lost, but by a matter of like 3 hours or something. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous. Like ran 75 k's a day for 50 days. Could that be right? 2,000 k's?
Had planned to run the 2,000 k's in under 30 days.
Something like that. And as soon as we got there, we started talking to him and said we're doing this campervan trip to find cool trails to mountain bike and trail run. And oh man, that piqued his interest. So he said he was going for a run that afternoon. I was injured from Hogsback when I hurt my knee. So we went on our bikes and he took us around his farm. It turns out he was running 120 odd k's a week at that stage, training for, I don't know, Sky Run maybe, and he took us around the farm. Man, exquisite. I mean, I think he pointed out Giant's Castle is one of the landmarks around there. And he took us around and along some of the single tracks on his farm, which join in with a network of trails there called the Sani Spurs. Underberg is near Sani Pass. It's about 20 k's from Sani Pass, and the Sani Spurs is like a 30 or 40 kilometer long mountain biking network, mostly sort of flat and meandering around the sort of plains there, but like crossing rivers and along the edge of the river, and like we did a cycle there a few days later as well, and strongly recommended. Like one of the highlight cycles of the trip for sure. So Steve took a liking to us. He invited us for dinner. He was telling us all about the sort of things, the activities that we could do nearby, and he mentioned that Khotso runs a horse riding expedition, and it's a 3-day tour, and that he would check when the next one was or whatever, but he sort of offhandedly said, oh, by the way, you know, you guys can do it at cost or just pay for your food or something. So we were like, oh, I was a bit iffy at the least. I mean, I'd never ridden a horse before. Essentially that was going to be on day 7 for us, after arriving in Khotso, and we'd only intended to stay there for 3 nights, we said this could be a very cool activity, and we decided to prolong our stay. And we made do there. It was absolutely icy in the Southern Drakensberg. That was the second coldest that we were on the trip. I think it hit 0 there. So it came to day 7, and we were going to embark on the horse expedition. It was very cold that morning, so we jumped in the back of a cattle truck with the 5 horses. So another 2 girls had come up from Cape Town to do it. There wasn't enough space in the front of the truck, and us as the sort of lesser paying citizens got stuck in the back with the horses, and there was a lot of horse pooing going on as we drove there, and the horses had sort of straps between them to separate them so they didn't get agitated and so on. But it was still pretty scary, like standing with a horse next to me on a very bumpy 90-minute drive up into the highlands as we approached the border of South Africa with Lesotho. And I forget the name of the border. I'm actually just going to look it up. I think the name of the border crossing was Bushman's Neck, and it was quite incredible. We stopped there, offloaded the horses from the truck. A Basotho guy named Charles had ridden from a remote village called Sehlabatebe, where he lives, which I later found out would be where we were actually headed. And he led us brilliantly on this horse riding expedition into Lesotho. But from the very get-go, it was quite a strange, sort of surreal feeling. Like, Georgia and I hadn't been on horses before at all. I don't think I'd even touched a horse before. And you just jump on and it kind of just goes. You had some control with the reins. I mean, I think the importance of a horse fitting was not lost on me after that. I mean, your inner thighs, it's agony. You're sitting the whole day, so I mean, goodness, with my dodgy lower back. But that aside, absolutely majestic sights. From the Bushman's Neck border into Lesotho, it's a road, but it definitely could not be driven. It was never a road as such for cars, just for foot and horseback. So we went up flat for a while, and then you start climbing over this pass. You drop down the other side a little bit, but ultimately we just climbed and climbed and climbed, and we were heading towards this village of Sehlabatebe, where Khotso has a lodge of its own, and has built a few rondavels, concrete structures and beds, and they have cooking facilities there. So after a long day on horseback, we got showered up nicely with hot water, with gas cookers, and we all gathered in the main room, which had a fireplace, and we played games. And then on the middle day of the 3, we did a 10K loop around the local area, saw some 10,000-year-old rock paintings, as I recall. Georgia, when we were crossing a river, her horse decided that it would suddenly try and wet its belly at that particular opportunity and just dropped. I mean, Georgia thought she was going to go underwater. Quite funny to watch, and similar activities on night 2, and then it was trace your steps back. We tried. I said at one stage, can these horses go faster? We got them into a canter for us. Just an incredibly difficult activity. It's all about rhythm. The horse can do it fine. It's difficult for the rider with no experience, and I just couldn't get it right. And I'm watching up ahead, Charles and the 2 girls who are experienced horse riders, like they just want to get into a gallop, but the 2 of us were so slow behind and we couldn't get it right. But what a memorable activity that was, and very grateful to Steve for inviting us along. So that was 10 days in Khotso ultimately. We decided to pack up shop and say goodbye to the team there. So I'm gonna leave that episode here, and in episode 4 we get to Karkloof in KwaZulu-Natal, just a wonderful place for off-road adventuring, and we make our way all the way to a place called Tranquilita's Adventure Farm, known for its mountain biking and rock climbing. Thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing.